we're going over this again with you today, and I'm grateful for the deck that Monsignor Siler and Doug Rich have prepared. And I might just circle back to that at the end of the Zoom. This will take about a half hour to go through, and we're going to be recording this, as you can see. So we're going to begin with a COVID-19 prayer. But thank you again to Monsignor Siler and for Doug for working on this PowerPoint deck for you. And thank you, all of you, for the great diligence that you're showing in COVID-19 situations and for taking some time today, just as we move into Christmas, to do our best to mitigate risk of contamination of COVID-19 on our parish and in our school facilities. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. This is the prayer that I sent to all of you very early on, to all the teachers, all the Catholic Charities employees, all the parish employees, and all the clergy early on. It's the COVID-19 prayer by Pedro de la Cruz. It's in Spanish and English. We'll do the English version now. Lord Jesus Christ, our divine physician, we ask you to guard and protect us from coronavirus COVID-19 and all serious illness. For all who have died from it, have mercy. For those that are ill now, bring healing. For those searching for a remedy, enlighten them. For medical caregivers helping the sick, strengthen and shield them. For those working to contain the spread, grant them success. For those afraid, grant peace. May your precious blood be our defense and salvation. By your grace, may you turn the evil of disease into moments of consolation and hope. May we always fear the contagion of sin more than any illness. We abandon ourselves to your infinite mercy. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, I'm just going to give this now to Monsignor Siler and to Doug.
Well, and I would just say that I think there's about one page in this PowerPoint that I added some data to. So Doug really did the hard lifting on this one, but which means if you don't like it, blame Doug. But no, I reviewed it very carefully, and it's a very fine presentation with lots of information. And we're focusing on the quarantine question, but it is important. You know, the religious education directives or religious services directives have changed 2 or 3 times in just the last 3 weeks. So want to, for those of you that will be leading services this Christmas and into the new year, to just get a little refresher of those too. Doug?
Thank you very much, Monsignor. And kind of the nature of this today, we're going to be going over some data as well as just some of the rules that are out there. We've seen a lot of rules and changing rules coming from various sources, and understand that the regulatory groups are, first of all, the governor's office, secondly, the State Department of Health, third, our local health districts, as to who can, exercise and make decisions around COVID and reopening and things like that. But they're going to go through a couple of scenarios, and I do a whole lot better with dialogue than I do with delivery. So we're actually going to talk about a couple of different symptomatic situations and a couple of different quarantine situations. And we'll open up the gallery so we can all kind of have a conversation about it. As we kind of go through things, if you could keep your mute buttons on unless you want to jump in, that'll make it a lot easier. I can see most of you have already done that, so thank you very much. So I'm going to begin our screen share here real quickly. Give me just a moment to bring this up. And is everybody easily able to see this? Bishop, are you able to see things okay? Okay, I've got a general nod there. And
yeah, we're good to go, Doug. It's a great screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. So basically, if you've got questions as we go, you can put them in the chat room, and I'll ask Bishop Tyson to monitor the chat room and jump in if there's immediate questions. What we're going to be covering today is this agenda, just to kind of recap the current case status in the 6 districts and 7 counties in which we serve. And I can tell you that the information is dated. I'm going to give you some data from just before Thanksgiving, some data from 2 weeks ago, and then just anecdotal data of what I've been noticing the last several days. And there's a direct correlation between gatherings, both social and otherwise, lack of social distancing, lack of quarantine. So we're seeing situations evolve quickly, and we have to be able to react uniformly and correctly. Monsignor Siler will then update the government's stance on religious gatherings. We've just had some very recent changes. We'll be reviewing key points needed in a reopening plan, both at the parish level and at the school level. Just a quick review of travel quarantine recommendations. And then we're going to do a couple of scenario things about what do we do when presented with symptoms in the workplace, and how do we advise those individuals? How do we talk to our fellow staff members if there's been a possible exposure? And do understand that there are rules around privacy and health information that we have to be very aware of underneath what's called HIPAA and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some of you may have caught in the news recently that a private employer up north in the Brewster area was just fined by the State Department of Labor and Industries $2 million for repeatedly violating advice, recommendations, and directives. And so part of what we're doing here is to just kind of re-inform you of the rules so that we don't expose ourselves. So let's go ahead and get started here. I just wanted to give you a real quick review of kind of where we've been since the start of the year when the virus first showed up in San Francisco and in the Seattle area, specifically Everett. This evolved to a situation where in March and April, Governor Inslee, first of all, closed schools from in-person learning. And the schools did a fantastic job, especially their teacher corps, about jumping to remote education platforms. This progressed to where Catholic schools, we did put together very robust reopening plans that weren't necessarily approved by health districts, but were certainly vetted by the health. And we were allowed to open in person in August. Parishes were then allowed to resume their indoor services in September. And then, of course, around the holidays, we've seen a spike in cases. I went on the State Department of Health website. Oh, did I get this right? Here we go. This is the State Department of Health website from December 10 that tells you the average number of tests per day over a week per 100,000 people in the population of that county. And then looking at the positivity rates out of the tests taken, what percentage were testing positive. And then the big number that's being tracked in our state are new cases per 100,000 people population over the preceding 2 weeks. We're all in stage 2 and stage 3 of reopening, and you can see on the bottom line what those thresholds are supposed to be. And you can also see the fact that we are well in excess of those thresholds. I know I've got people from all these different counties here. I'm going to give you another slide that shows you where these numbers were 2 weeks earlier. And you can see, with the exception of Benton County, they were quite a bit lower. Everyone else has been growing at a high rate. Douglas County was not having very many tests, but they had a significant number of them coming back positive. So you can see, while they're testing more in Douglas County, you can also see that the number of new cases are also up substantially. I can tell you in Yakima, following the Yakima County health site, that we currently have the most people that we've ever had sitting in hospital beds at 59, and that is up from 52 2 days earlier. We've got a substantial problem here in town, and I'm sure that's the same case in a lot of our different counties. So that's why this is so very important. Monsignor, do you want to take over here?
Yeah, if you could just advance one screen at a time for me. So this is the most recent change. Outdoor services had been allowed with a maximum of 200 persons allowed on property either owned by the church or adjacent to it. A week or so ago, that changed to any property. So in theory, a parish could rent a school gym or another large space. And then just 2 days ago, the recommendation, well, it became a recommendation. You can have, in theory, an unlimited number of outdoor participants at a mass, as long as you have 6 feet of spacing between household units and have the proper social hygiene cleanliness, etc. Now, practically speaking, for Central Washington, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but it might mean, because it's too cold. Although I suppose we could all bundle up like we do for football games, but it might be more helpful in the springtime when we were able to maybe move masses outdoors and have larger groups. Doug? So right now, indoor services are allowed at 25% capacity. And it also used to say, or 200 persons, whichever is less. 2 days ago, Governor Inslee removed that 200 figure as a requirement. It's now a recommended maximum. So if you have a church, 25% capacity is 300, and you can have 300 people in your church socially spaced, and family groups with the proper hygiene, cleaning, etc., then you can have more than 200. And again, there are just a few of our churches that might be able to. And since I see Father Rosemar on the screen right now, Father Rosemar, what's the maximum capacity at 25% for St. Joseph in Wenatchee?
220.
220. So you can have another 20 people at Mass. It's a small victory, but it helps. Now in Kittitas County, and I did send out this morning, again, a copy of the newest religious directory. They've really removed the phases from that, those directives. It's just, everybody has the same rules now, but back when we were talking about phase 3, Kittitas County in theory could have had 50% capacity in their church with a maximum of 400. Doug? Now, we're not to have the congregation sing. I know that's hard. And of course, if they're wearing their masks like they should be, we may not know that they're singing. But more importantly, we're really only allowed to have one cantor and one musical accompanist. Now, you may have more than one musician, more than one cantor, but in terms of doing that at the same time, it's one musician and one cantor at a time. So you could rotate in, I suppose, a trumpet player for a fanfare at Christmas, or however you want to be creative with that. But again, the requirement from the state is only one cantor or singer, one musical accompanist. And they are to sing with their masks on. Doug? Priest and lector may remove mask while proclaiming the word. Otherwise, you should be wearing your masks at all times. Some parishes do have shields in place, 3-sided shields at their ambos, so that when a person, a lector or the priest or deacon is speaking from the ambo, that provides an extra level of protection. But I would say that it's not required, but you do need to make sure that you're at least 12 feet from the nearest people if you're going to read or preach with your mask off. Again, the idea is to prevent the spread of any droplets. The Eucharist is to be distributed in the hand only by the priest, deacon, or communion minister. And Father Ibach, our judicial vicar, forwarded to me an interesting document that he'd gotten from another canon lawyer. It seems that a parishioner in Kentucky, I believe, had appealed to the Vatican, the bishop's restriction of communion on the tongue, and he asked for a dispensation directly from Rome to receive communion on the tongue, and the Vatican said, no, you must obey your bishop's directives. So we know that's generated some controversy, but it's been backed up now with some additional documentation. One thing that has not changed, and Doug just put that up on the screen, maximum capacity for weddings and funerals remains at 30 persons, not counting the staff. So you can have the minister, deacon, priest, deacon, a lector, live streamer, a couple of musicians, and then 30 mourners, and no receptions or wakes. And you know, I guess the logic behind this is that at weddings and funerals, people are drawn to be especially close together perhaps even more so than they are at a Sunday Mass or daily Mass. And we did have one rather prominent wedding in Ritzville, I believe, that really became kind of a super spreader event in Grant County and Lincoln County. And we just can't be contributing to that. So and I know that it takes a lot of pastoral care and concern for our families, working with them to help them understand and live with these guidelines. And hopefully we'll see some improvement. Now, the latest date that these are effective is through January 4th, 2021. It's kind of a routine, though, for the governor to extend these. And generally it involves the approval of the minority and majority leaders in the state legislature. And they have been very willing to continue to give the governor that authority. So, these directives, we always pay attention to must, should, and would. So must means it must be obeyed. That's the strongest language. Should is a very strong recommendation, and unless there's a good reason, we should do it. Could is more an optional recommendation. And I think that's it. Thank you,
Okay,
Doug.
before moving on, Bishop, are there any comments or questions in the chat room that we should be aware of?
No, I'm just kind of giving comments as people come out.
Got it.
And thanks, Father Duffner, for your question. The limit is 30, even if it's outdoor. Again, as I indicated in the chat room, I really am very supportive of this because I've actually talked to priests who find managing the weddings and the funerals their emotional high points. And as Monsignor Siler was indicating, and it's not like going to a grocery store. We're not emotionally connected to people at a grocery store, but weddings, times of grief, people want to reach out, they want to hug. It's very hard for our folks to do this, but it's also very, very important because, as noted, we had a super spreader event in Grant County. I'm looking at the chat room direct message. Thank you, Father Mariscal. He's writing, perhaps at least the lector should wear masks since the priest and deacon who follow will touch the ambo and kiss the gospel. That's a good point. As you know, Father Mariscal and I just did a televised mass yesterday. I keep my mask on to kiss the book of the Gospels. And I keep my mask on to kiss the altar. I take my mask off when I am alone at the altar proclaiming a presidential prayer or preaching. But as you know, presiding at Eucharist, because I'm over elements, I have my mask on for the entire preface and Eucharistic prayer. I keep the paten over the chalice, which is an unusual custom, again, just to maximize the protection. Father Jesus, did you want to add anything to that or any observation? I know you've been managing this at the cathedral, and of course our prayers are with Msgr Ecker as well, and he seems to be doing well. He's barking about bringing the checks to sign, so he's feeling okay apparently. Father Jesus.
No, that's the only observation I had about wearing at least the lector wear the mask, because also afterwards the priest kisses the gospel and he's there, then the lector oftentimes comes back to do the petitions, and if the lector doesn't have mask and the priest may be contaminated, he or she may also get contaminated or infected. And I agree. Yeah.
No, that's good. And I think you're free to do that. What we're saying is you have to follow the guidelines. I noticed, for example, so you might, in your particular circumstance, deem it wise to be a little more, you and Monsignor Ecker, a little more robust in requiring things locally. I'll give you another example. it's different but related. I noticed Roslyn is still is distributing communion after the final blessing. They decided to keep that protocol in place, even though we kind of loosened up on that as time went on. So there might be specific things that you need to do locally that might be more robust that you're free to do. I think what we've promulgated are, the bare minimums. I don't know if Msgr Siler wants to comment on that. And I'll just send it back to Doug or Msgr Siler at this point.
Could I say something?
Yeah.
We using the spray after each reading in the ambo, so that's so that people can take their mask out, and then right after they just spray and for the next person, and that is working pretty well for us. So
thanks for that suggestion. Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah. I noticed in Richland, they've got the little guns and they spray down the pews. And, I think there's some very thoughtful things that are going on. A number of the schools also have the spray guns to kind of rapidly disinfect. I think Richland's doing that.
No, but this is just for the proclamation, Bishop.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways you can do that easily. Thank you.
Okay, let's jump back to things.
I think Msgr Siler has something he's going to.
Yeah, well, it's really just more of a little bit of a humorous thing. But Father Felix in Toppenish, I'm filling in for him, had set it up so that the people are actually cleaning the pews themselves, and that speeds things up. The only trouble is, as I quietly recess out of the church, the recessional music is the spray bottles. So the people are doing the job. We do what we got to do. It's not perfect, but we do what we need to do to get through this pandemic.
And in the unlikely event of a water landing, your cushion can be used as a flotation device, right? It's kind of like the cabin attendants in the plane. Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Okay, back to it here. I'm going to try to. Okay, as you all know, the governor has recommended remote learning with the exception of cohorts of 5 or less. That recently got changed to 15 or less. And it was kind of in direct opposition of what OSPI recommends, is that they want all the kids in the schools as quickly as possible. Some changes have been made that basically if a school can show that they can keep transmissions low, even if it's rising in the community, they are allowed to practice at their current stance. Public schools are not allowed to expand or are not allowed to expand beyond the junior high level until their area is below 200 cases per week, per 2 weeks, excuse me. So if you saw our earlier numbers, you know that we all have quite a long way to go. The good news is we're already in place and we are keeping transmissions low. So we are allowed to continue to practice and have the same number of kids currently. You can see the health districts recommend remote learning, but it does vary from district to district. I know in Chelan County, they did not allow the Wenatchee school to open right away. They since then have allowed that, and they've been doing very, very well in their protocols. And we're currently open. We had 2 closed for a week due to an outbreak, which mainly was due to outbreak at the staff level as opposed to the student level. I think the parents have been incredibly diligent about recognizing if COVID exists and taking proper measures, notifying the principals. The principals have been very good about talking through their situations with me and their health district, and so far we're going to stay the course. Student-age children represent 11% of COVID cases statewide. We haven't had any transmissions inside our buildings yet. It may very well happen. Those transmissions are most likely to occur at the high school level. It seems like the younger kids just really are following the rules and not being able to pass things very often. We always have an option of a remote learning platform, though we do encourage in-person learning, and that decision is made at the local level. Okay, you may have read recently that Governor Inslee in the last couple of days has advised a travel ban for certain countries. I really don't know the details about it, but I think as it relates to our communities, We're more concerned about families that might be traveling out of area or having family members travel in to meet them from out of area. While the recommendation is to quarantine if you're coming from out of state, a lot of the local health districts even think that that ought to be the case with regional travel as well, since it's very different in certain communities within our state. He's recommending upon our return that quarantine occur for 14 days. This is per Governor Inslee's advisory. That has not changed, although the State Department of Health has followed the Centers for Disease Control, allowing for a reduction in quarantine to 10 days if you are asymptomatic. And you can even reduce it further to 7 days if you're accompanied with a negative test taken within the last 48 hours of that 7-day quarantine. There's a little bit of confusion about how you do the count. The Yakima Health District, for example, advises that the day you notice you have symptoms or the day you have a test is day 0, and then you can return on the 7th day. But the key things to remember is if you are going to try to shorten that quarantine period from 10 days to 7 days, you need a negative test result as a part of that, and that test result has to occur within the last 48 hours. And at this point, we're making no directive on travel requirements. We leave it up to the local parish and the school to make their own determination about how they want to do that. Again, the health districts are going to be different. Okay, so what do we do when symptoms show up at the workplace or school? These are the things that we should be having in place at religious services, at the workplace, at the schools, that you do attestation plans where the individuals are asked 8 symptom-related questions. I'll go into that a little bit further down the road. And then 3 contact or travel questions if you've been in close contact with somebody that's tested positive for COVID. And by the way, Catholic Charities has developed a Google-based automated plan that most of the schools are using, where the parents can do the attestation for the child before they drop the child off. That way, they've got all the information collated and stored electronically, and all they really have to do is temperature check the child to make sure that they're in good shape, and then get them into their room. That seems to be working very well. I haven't talked specifically with charities about this, but I imagine they would be willing to roll this out to the parishes if that was needed. We recommend retaining records for a minimum of 14 days for tracing purposes. I know a lot of the churches, the parishes are using seating charts so that they know where everyone is sitting at each service. That way, if one person is identified as positive, within the following few days, they can then notify those that might have been right around them immediately so that they can take preventative action if they felt it was necessary. The first thing you want to do if symptoms are presented at the workplace or school is to refuse entry, have the person return home, or if they're already in the building and start to present symptoms, get them into a separate space, preferably closed door until transportation can be arranged to get the person home. You're obviously going to want to take care of the space that was used by that individual, and any person that is in contact with that individual or in the space, well, mainly with the individual, is considered to be at a medium to high risk of transmission, and they need to upgrade their protective equipment appropriately. Obviously, we're recommending hand washing and wearing a cloth face mask at all times. But if I'm assigned to take care of a student, for example, in a room until that student can go home, I need to have at a minimum vinyl gloves and KN95 masks or greater to reduce transmission. Other people may want to have eye goggles or a shield that goes with that mask. There are directives, and if you come into that situation, by all means, contact Msgr. Siler or me, and we can give you the right direction. I was given a bunch of KN95 masks by ESD 105 in Yakima that we've gotten out to most of the schools. I still have a considerable supply left at my office, so if you would like some of these, I am more than happy to get them. And then the last thing you want to do with this individual is identify who their close contacts are. And currently at the state level, that's defined as being within a 6-foot radius of that individual for greater than 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So if I come in close contact and leave, but overall I maybe have spent 20, 25 minutes with this individual, then I would be considered a close contact, and I need to take the appropriate measures. So COVID symptoms are classified into two classifications. Class A, where the existence of any one of these symptoms is a strong indicator of coronavirus. Shortness of breath, new loss of taste or smell, dry cough, fever, and dizziness. There are also Class B symptoms that are considered an indicator of COVID if it exists for more than 24 hours, or you have two or more of them at the same time. And you can see them listed there. And by the way, not only are we recording this, but we will be getting this PowerPoint deck out to everybody for your use in your buildings. And remember, this is a directive and recommendation from the diocesan level. You've all done an exceptional job of preparing your own reopening plans. I've begun to review a couple of the school plans with some of the new changes that have come out, and we're making these changes as we go. You are more than welcome at the parish level to forward those to Msgr Siler as well. And between he and I, we will do a review to make sure that they're, still in concert with what the state and local authorities currently recommend. Let's talk about a couple of symptom scenarios. An employee comes into the facility Monday morning complaining of shortness of breath and a dry cough, which started over the weekend. What steps do you take and instruction given to the employee? Let's have a conversation about that. Feel free to jump in. What do you think you should be doing if one of your employees has issues over the weekend and shows up Monday morning on your doorstep? Feel free to unmute if you'd like to jump in.
Sending home.
Send them home.
And I don't know, invited him to take a test and relaxed and isolated at home.
Right. I think you're spot on. Any others there? Well, let's go back to the screen share and just see how well Father Jaime did. Da, 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 da. There we go. Don't allow entry of the building and send them home. Advise they receive the COVID test. Father Jaime is 2 for 2. If no test is taken or they test positive, they must isolate and stay at home. And the no test is taken. There's a little bit of gray area here. In the school world, they're considered what is called a presumptive positive, unless they are able to get a negative test. So if they do test positive or refuse to take a test, they should stay away from the building for the later of 10 days from the date of symptom, returning on the 11th day, as long as they have been symptom-free for 24 hours without the aid of medication, i.e. if they were running a fever and they took a fever reducer to get their temperature down on that 10th day, that doesn't count. They need to be symptom-free for 24 hours without aid of medication, and any other symptoms that they might have had would have subsided. Let's look at a second symptom scenario. Parent of a student with a persistent runny nose over the weekend decides to get tested as a precaution. He receives a result Tuesday. His son, the student, develops a runny nose also on Tuesday, and that son was at school Monday and Tuesday. What steps do you take? Care to weigh in on that one, Greg Plager? Are you here, Greg? I know that.
Yeah, I'm there, Doug. Sorry. Flip that back so we can see the question, please.
Okay,
For the scenario.
Hang on here, one sec. Da-da-da. Here you go.
So the parent has the runny nose, and then the kid has the runny nose, right?
Right.
So again, you go back to the assumption you have symptoms. The child should be sent home for those 10 days, recommended for the quarantine because they're presumptive positive. Recommended testing after 4 to 5 days. And if they've been in school, I notify families, the school community, do full cleaning of the classroom, all the spaces where that child might have been, and continue to be in contact with the parents on how things are going.
And how is it you know all those steps so well, Greg?
Well, I've had a couple opportunities to practice.
And they've done a very good job of it.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Because it is hard to pay attention to all those moving parts. Let's see how Greg did on this. Student is considered at a minimum a close contact and needs to be sent home. Advise the child get tested for COVID to determine whether he was contagious while at school Monday or Tuesday. And that's particularly important because you want to be able to set, the kids in the classroom that might have been close, you want to set their families at ease. Until a negative test result, the other students who were in close contact should also be sent home to learn remotely and monitor for symptoms. And the son and his close contacts would follow the close contact protocol. This is slightly different, folks. You have if you were a close contact, I better go into this in a little bit more detail. If you are considered a close contact and you are asymptomatic, you should isolate for 10 days from the date of last contact with the presumptive positive individual. So if you're a fellow student and the student who tests positive is sent home, that's day 0 of your date of last contact. So now you have a 10-day quarantine protocol, at which point you are also looking for symptoms. Now, in a situation where there might be 2 kids at the same school and one tests positive, the other one is considered a close contact for as long as they're in contact with their sibling. So that could be another 10 days before they start the 10-day quarantine. So that's why you see that 10 days plus 10 days. Okay, here's our next scenario.
So Doug, I have a comment. You mentioned getting tested. It would seem that if a child has the situation that's been presented, that child should be tested immediately rather than waiting the 4 or 5 days, because if they're positive, then that needs to go out. If they're negative, that's also important because that doesn't impede anybody else at the school.
That's a good point, John. I think the thing we fight there is what is the efficacy of the test at which particular day? We know from the science that the first 3 days of exposure, if you get tested, you're really not going to get necessarily an accurate result. Days 4 and 5 are considered better, and day 7 is ideal. Usually that test is incredibly accurate. I would tell you to not only contact, if you were the school, not only to contact me or Msgr. Siler, but also certainly to talk to your local health district. They will give you the definite protocol in which to follow. So far, I'd say we're batting about 80% with what the health districts say, opposed to our advice. We do get overridden a few times, and that's okay because we're learning as the process goes as well. But I agree with you generally, testing as soon as possible to put the rest of the contacts at ease is definitely
what that does is it puts everybody else in the guilty until proven innocent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's what makes it so hard.
And the virus is a mean-spirited judge.
Doug, if I could mention one thing.
Sure, Perry.
One of the things that our health district has made some tests available for the schools. So like we'll have 3 tests on site. We can give those. They're the fast tests, and once a student takes that or a staff member takes it, all it can do is show that they do have it. If the test result is negative, they still have to quarantine and they still have to take the other test because it's not as accurate of a test. But if you just want to fight, like if I have a staff member and I just want to make sure that they do have it, and so then that would save them a trip to the health department. I could give them that test, and if it shows that they have it, then they wouldn't have to go and take the other one. If it shows they don't have it, they still do though.
That's good that Benton Franklin is doing that. We haven't seen that in some of the other districts yet. So yeah, if you're able to take advantage of that, and I think your protocol is correct. Bishop, you had put something in there that I only got part of. Did you want to expand on? And your okay, you're unmuted.
I'm
now.
sorry. I'm coming at a little. It's like walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time. So yeah, there's a couple things that have come up in the chat room. So maybe I'll address those. One, very recently, The question is, you know, we have musicians, they live together. So do they have to mass? Can't they be together? Can't you have more than one cantor if they're husband and wife? And the technical answer is no on that. It's a good question. I thank you for asking that question. It was a private chat and I accidentally answered to everybody, which is the confusion there, Doug. Sorry about that.
Okay.
The second question that came up that I just want to maybe go back to, and maybe Monsignor Siler wants to address it. This is around staff traveling to Mexico and coming back. Yes, they would quarantine. And I've suggested in the chat room that you can contact Anna Aparicio, our vice chancellor, in terms of the employment question. So, you know, there's some laws that in which we're required to, you know, provide people paid you know, time if they're sick with COVID-19. And of course, we already do that. But, you know, if somebody's in quarantine, you can have them work remotely out of quarantine. So because they're in quarantine doesn't automatically mean they're not working. They can work remotely. But they have to be in quarantine. So if you have an employee coming back, staff, it was a good question that came up, you know, that's coming back from Mexico, they would quarantine. That's what that PowerPoint that Doug went over is about. When they get back, they would quarantine, but they might work remotely. You wouldn't require them to take extra vacation time to quarantine. You could have them work remotely. Monsignor Siler, please jump in.
Well, I think the difficulty with that is that we're not requiring it of the priest coming back from Mexico. So that makes it difficult to say that we're going to require this of employees. Now, that's why we're not issuing diocesan guidelines, but we do want people to be prudent and pay attention to their contacts. And, you know, if there's any doubt at all, then quarantining makes a lot of sense in finding things for people to do at home. You know, the other problem with the governor's travel advisory is that it includes exemption for business travel and educational travel. And, you know, the risks of picking up a virus at an educational event or a travel event are probably just as great as spending time with the family that you know doesn't have COVID-19. So you know, we have to do the best we can, and it takes a lot of good common sense and a lot of prudential judgment. And if you know that folks that you're working with don't have those virtues polished yet, then you certainly can find work for them to do at home and limit the exposure that they have to other people.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because what we're talking about is a travel advisory. So
it's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement, but I'm trying to give you a clean answer on, you know, what happens when someone, well, it's the same advisory as if they're moving around. So yeah, it is, you know, I think we grapple with this, just trying as best as we can with our seminarians. So the seminarians coming from out of state, they're already in a quarantine bubble in their seminary, and they move to a quarantine bubble when they're placed in a parish, and then they go to see their family. I mean, we've tried to manage this as best as we can with a strong eye on those advisory guidelines. And, you know, so, but thank you for the question. Hope that helps. I think the other question would be, you know, the married couple. I think maybe I said that. So even if the couple's married, they're living together, can they both cantor together? No. I mean, if you're asking that question, that's the short answer. Father Dan Duffner, if we have a greater capacity at 25 capacity than 200, do we need to submit to an addendum to our plan to increase the 25% number? Yes. So if you are now in a worship facility like Wenatchee, possibly like Richland, like Moses Lake, you would just, you know, send us a revised safety plan that says that you're going to be, that you're 25%, you know, I think Father Osmar is going to be at 220 rather than 200. It is a change in your plan, and you're sending us a revision on the plan. I'm grateful. I'm in an exchange with Father Rogelio at St. Joseph and Sunnyside. He's done a little revision on his plan. He sent it to me. So any revisions that you're doing as you fine tune, you'd want to send those in so we have records of what revision you're making. But we would readily work with you on any revision. I don't know if, thank you, Jerry Kaminsky, for your comment. You know, I think one of the things I noted in the chat room back on this cantering situation, you know, the people on Facebook aren't going to know that these two cantors are married. What will it look like? It'll look like we're not following, you know, what the safety guidelines are. So you want to think about what are people seeing. I'm not, you know, I took a couple photos without my mask with the seminarians when we were at a gathering, but we didn't post those on Facebook. But everybody's kind of quarantined, right? You know, because when they came back from seminary, then they went immediately into a kind of a pretty restricted environment in the rectories, in the rectory communities. But I don't want to post on Facebook to make it look like we're not following. So we did all the public photos we were masked, okay? We didn't take pictures of us having our socially spaced dinner in Schoenberg Hall, because it's confusing for what people are seeing. But we did have an in-person mass together with chairs scattered about. So you want to think about, what do people see? That's the problem when you're doing a live stream mass and you've got cantors that are not masked and two cantors together who may be married. And I understand the logic, but we have to think about what we're also saying to people. Thank you, John and Mary Probst. No wood, wind, or brass instrument should be allowed, as the spittle generating is then broadcast in aerosol form. Well, that's a good question. I do think we are allowing for an accompaniment that is a woodwind, or a brass instrument in social isolation to play the trumpet. Yeah, I think you want to think that through carefully. There isn't anything that forbids that, John and Nancy. But, you know, for example, at the cathedral here in Yakima, I don't know what's happening this year. We actually have had a trumpeter in the cathedral choir loft. I mean, I don't know that they're doing that this year, but it probably would be okay because they're way up in a cathedral choir loft, away from the congregation. They're not leaning over the edge with the bell of the trumpet, you know. I mean, I think we have to think through carefully. But your point, John, is very key. There is a difference between an instrumentalist on the keyboard and a trumpeter, you know, that could, you know, broadcast vapors, I think is the term. So, and Monsignor Siler, thank you for your intervention as well. This is the guidance. Music, no choir, band, or ensemble shall perform during the service in congregation. Singing indoors is prohibited. Vocal or instrumental soloists, musical performers are permitted with an accompanist so long as the performer wears a face mask covering. In the event the soloist is performing on a woodwind or brass instrument, the soloist may remove their face covering only during the performance. So thank you, Monsignor Siler.
Well, and Bishop, there may be some coverings that one can put over the end of the instruments that don't change the tone too much. Now, I've been watching some Lawrence Welk reruns, and there's all sorts of interesting things that you can do to change the sound of a brass instrument. But I think just a very simple paper shield of some kind of bell might.
That is a safe COVID-19 activity, to binge watch reruns of Lawrence Welk. That's really good, Monsignor Siler.
Guitarists are in high demand, so give me a call if you need one.
I think I've tried to monitor the chat room for you there, Doug. And I think that is everything that's on the chat.
Well, let's jump on to our last quarantine scenario. And we're going to look at this final scenario from two different angles. Your office employee's spouse complains of fever and sore throat on a Sunday and decides to get tested on Tuesday. The employee has been in the office Monday and Tuesday and has just told you about the spouse getting tested. We don't know if they're positive or not. The office staff is diligent about distancing, hygiene, and wearing face masks. So what is the instruction you give the employee? Love to hear some opinions out there. Employee's spouse had issues over the weekend and decided to get tested on Tuesday. Employee tells you about this on Tuesday. Employee is obviously a close contact to this person that might have COVID. So, Perry, you have, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, just anytime an employee is getting tested or a spouse is getting tested, anybody in the family, they go home until that test result comes back. It's
Okay.
just real simple.
Any other input? Okay. I'm going to bring it back up again here real quick. If you have another one along this line, please jump in. And considered a close contact until a negative test result is obtained by the spouse. Ask the employee to identify any of their close contacts within the office. And we already talked about that in the earlier scenario. If it's negative, the employee can return right away. If it's positive, now we go into the 10-day isolation from onset of spouse's symptoms plus a 10-day quarantine. So it's possible that your employee could be gone as long as 20 days. That could be shortened to 17 days if they accompany it with a negative test taken, you know, in that 16th or 17th day. In some cases, maybe that spouse might, you know, maybe they've got a rental house that's empty and they might just go immediately to that. Then you could start that 10-day count at that point. I see there's a couple of hands up. Are you able to see those, Bishop? Let's see, I saw one. Okay, Mike Botello, you want to jump in?
If that employee has been in close contact with other members in the office, don't we have to also ask those members to go home until we have that the other employee gets a negative result?
You have given me the perfect segue. Hold on a sec. I'm going to get to that, Mike, on the next slide. But the key point here is if attestation is being used, the employee should have answered yes, but whether they have been in close contact with somebody exhibiting COVID-like symptoms. That's a very specific question on that attestation. So we need to really be diligent with our employees to make sure that they're answering all the questions on those those forms. And I think we talked about Class A and Class B symptoms on an earlier slide. So getting to what Mike said, what is the instruction we give the other staff members? Mike, you brought up sending them home as well as a possibility. Are there any others out there? Please jump in, y'all. What would you tell your other employees? Okay, we're going to go back to it then and take a look at our results. Provide a general notice that someone inside the office environment may be considered a close contact, and to remind everyone of diligence about hygiene, surface cleaning, wearing masks, and remaining socially distant. If they believe they've been in close contact with another employee, they can speak with their supervisor to determine whether it was the employee with the tested spouse. And this is kind of where we're getting into our HIPAA area. We do have another resource here at the office, and Diana Aparicio, our Vice Chancellor and head of our human resources, and she can really do some detailed knowledge around your specific scenarios. The reason why I said they can go directly to their supervisor is that way, if there is information to be shared, it's being shared among a limited number of people on a need-to-know basis. So perhaps if employee B said that they've been in contact with employee C and D within close contact, but you know that the employee A is the one with the spouse, you could then say, no, you're okay. So, you know, that would be an example of a scenario where you could use that. Give all the employees an option of working from home until test results are known. Give consideration to scheduling your office to make sure you have proper coverage. Jump on in, Mike.
Yeah, when we had a similar type situation happen, we closed our parish office, obviously went in and deep cleaned. It was during a period in which we had a day off anyways. and it just seemed like very similar in this. We didn't identify the employee because you can't do that. But we asked everybody to monitor themselves, and if you didn't have symptoms 3 days later, when we open the office again, come back in. It just seems that would be a more appropriate or more safer thing to do if we're, especially given the conditions under which we're finding the genes mutating, this thing's mutating, and we're really trying to stop it.
Mike, how long ago did that occur?
It was towards the beginning of this, like
Yeah.
2-3.
Yeah, I seem to recall that. And I think what we're finding from the health districts is they're getting more and more information about the virus, and they're able to give a more detailed responses on how to respond. And it's kind of not surprised me, but I've noticed that they're becoming more lenient, especially
Okay.
in the schools, about keeping the kids inside, or in the schools if we can. But again, it's entirely up to the local parish, the local office, on how you want to handle this. We just wouldn't want you to be more lenient than what we're advising. If you want to be more restrictive, by all means, go for it if that's more comfortable for you.
I mean, our protocol involves, if there's any suspected case, we just go ahead and deep clean the whole facility, or every possible space that anybody would have been in, just because.
I was talking with Perry Kelly about the foggers, these $600 foggers, and it was amazing to him that they looked exactly like paint guns, and so they were able to basically accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, Monsignor Siler, I think you want to jump in.
Just a comment that it's from my experience where infections have started to spread, it's been when people have kind of let their guards down. And in theory, if everybody in the office is wearing their masks at the proper time and sanitizing their hands, and surfaces are being cleaned, you shouldn't be transmitting the virus to each other. But people let their guards down, they take their masks off, or they wear them, don't wear them properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and I don't know how we fix that really, but we do have to be prudent, obviously, and try to minimize the potential spread as much as possible.
I think the last slide here, and then I will be done and pass it back to Bishop, is this came out of a Southwest Washington, a staff symptom flow chart, where it gives various scenarios about whether there are symptoms, a diagnosis, or a close contact, whether you can or cannot come back to work, how long you might have to quarantine or isolate under various scenarios you might see here. It defines what a close contact is. It defines COVID-19 Class A and Class B symptoms that are then, identified up here. So there are plenty of these out there. Obviously, if your local health authority has created one, you're going to want to refer to that because it's closest to ground zero for you. We have several examples at the diocesan level that we can share with you as all. So that's the end of my presentation. Obviously, we're open for plenty of questions. Bishop, back to you.
Yeah, no, I thank you for this. And I think, I've been trying to address some of them in private. The question of religious education, again, you just want to follow the protocols that you follow for Mass, social distancing. Thank you for those questions. Just kind of know the other thing on the horizon, as I work with the dean, as I'm working with the confirmation schedule, I'm realizing a lot of parishes are requesting more than one confirmation time in their parish because of social distancing. So I'm realizing that confirmation is going to be more complicated this year. So I'm thinking that through a little bit, but that the bigger parishes might need more than one confirmation in their parish in order to do the 25% with the sponsors and all of this. So I'm anticipating probably pulling the deans together to kind of go back over how we might do this a little bit. But I want you to know that I do appreciate the comments coming in about confirmation in some of the parishes that have more confirmandi than normal, like Mattawa, Quincy, Moses Lake, East Wenatchee, some of those questions are starting to come in. So I'm starting to think that through. It would mean a lot more confirmation services. And I think, it might mean, I'm going to go over this with the deans, but I'm thinking very carefully that it would only be the candidate, mom, dad, and 2 sponsors, that we might really restrict who goes to those confirmation masses. So, but kind of know that that's on the horizon. We will be sending this out, the video. So thank you for your question, Kurt, Father Kurt Hadley. And Doug, thank you for the tremendous amount. Doug, as you know, is our Director of Parish and Leadership Services, a lot of research in this. Thank you, Monsignor Siler. You've got your eye on this. And I know that we both mentioned Diana Aparicio, who's, we didn't require her to be on this Zoom. And I think we're all trying to kind of have a holiday as well. But Diana wants to make sure to send her greetings. She's the Vice Chancellor and is very much available as you deal with those employment questions and family leave questions tied to COVID, and is available. Again, Monsignor Siler and I are usually pretty good. I'm pretty good. Monsignor Siler is just excellent on responding to immediate inquiries. And I keep up pretty well on the text messages as well. So you're free to contact us as those surprise situations come up, or things that you don't expect occur, or you're having a difficulty with a situation or a parishioner. We're always happy to give you some theater lines. And I know that there have been a lot of sensitive, tough things that have gone on out there. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, Monsignor Siler. Thanks to our little team at the Pastoral Center. Thank you, school principals who have jumped on. And I just see so many staff. Thank you, the priests that are on. Thank you for participating today in this Zoom. And I think we'll just close with a prayer at this point. I think we are done. If there's anything else from either Monsignor Siler or Doug, I think I'm just going to close the prayer. And this will be my other common prayer that we're using, Mary, undoer of knots. These are a lot of administrative knots that you're trying to pull out. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Mother of fair love, I look to you. Take into your hands the ribbon of my life and see the snarl of knots that keeps me bound to sin, anxiety, and hopelessness. I beg you, Mother, by your powerful intercession and loving fingers of love and grace, undo the knots in my heart and in my life. Free me to love as Christ loves. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Again, thanks for being here, and have a great Christmas. God bless everybody.